All right. Thank you so much for joining. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. I wanted to let you all know that we will be fielding questions at the very end of the webinar. You will be muted throughout, but you can use the question box to send us anything you'd like to ask, anything that pops into your head, anytime inspiration strikes as we're talking. So we'd love to hear from you and get to know you all a little bit better. So please send us your questions and we'll have a live Q&A session at the end. All right, now I wanted to introduce my co-host here, Michelle Venoge from our customer success team here at Handshake. Michelle, tell us a bit about yourself.
For sure, thanks everyone. So excited to be here. So a little bit about me. I work on the customer success team here at Handshake. So I work with our partners of all different shapes and sizes across different industries and really coach them on how to be really successful on our platform and of course how to build a world-class employer brand. Before my time at Handshake, I actually worked at another large corporation that focused a little bit more on employer brand in terms of it was more of a review site. And so I have a couple of years now of experience working in this space. So really excited to share some best practices around this topic.
And I'm sure everyone is excited to hear from you with all your great experience. All right, and my name is Rachel Morgan. I am on the product marketing team here at Handshake, and I'm here because I have studied employer brand for the last 5.5 years now. I've worked at a number of different recruiting technology companies, and what that means is I've had a lot of opportunities to dig into research around what makes top employer brands. And so I'm super excited to share all that research with you that I've picked up over the years, and combined with Michelle's really great strategic mind around how to build an employer brand at employers from all different sizes and industries, combined with my more tactical knowledge around the different things that work day to day. We're excited to share with you some of the big mistakes that people make when building an employer brand with early career talent, as well as ways that we can fix those things starting little by little with day-to-day tactics that you can start using today. So we'll start out talking about why employer branding is important, and most of you are here because you know that, but we wanted to share a little bit of research around that to back that up, and then we'll go into those 8 mistakes that I know you're all here for, and then we'll go recap all the tactics that we talked about that you can start using today and you can start influencing your employer brand right away. So, and then we'll go into the Q&A. So make sure you're putting those questions in. We love questions. So please feel free to send those along whenever. Great. So I'm going to get started here talking about the influence of a strong employer brand. Just to make sure that we're all level set and on the same playing field here, I wanted to describe when we say employer brand or employer branding, we're talking about all of the ways that you're communicating what your company can do for talent that you hire, for talent that might intern at your company, anything that you are saying that your company can provide to a career, any value that you're providing. And so these are all the ways that you can communicate that value in all of the different channels. So employer brand isn't just about what people say to other people about your company. It's not just what you put on your career website. It's really any channel that people are getting information about you as an employer. That's what we're talking about when we're saying employer brand. So that's a really vast and wide description, and we're going to give you ways to break it down so that you can understand how to tackle each different type of channel. So the main thing about employer branding is that it brings results. It's not just this nebulous concept that is hard to describe. It's really bringing you more applicants, more people that are visiting your career page, more interactions with customers, or sorry, with talent, with anyone that is, well, talent is your customer, so it makes sense. And so students and alumni that interact with your brand are actually 20% more likely to open your message. So if you're sending them a message, this is all data from Handshake. So if you're sending a message from Handshake to somebody who is on, who you're talking to, and they've recently viewed your employer brand page, they're going to be interested in talking to you because they already have some context around what your company does, who your company is, and what value they can provide. So I wanted to let you all know that also the talent is 50% more likely to apply to a job on your career page if they have interacted with your employer page in some way. For example, if they've read a review or seen a testimonial on your employer page, they're 50% more likely to apply. So employer brand isn't just this thing that you need to try to fix the perception of your company. It's actually something that can drive results, such as responses to your messages and applications. All right. With that, before we get started jumping into the 8 mistakes, I wanted to ask you all, what is the biggest challenge you're facing when building a strong employer brand with an early career audience? I would love to hear from all of you, and let us know what you're facing today and what are the biggest issues. While we're waiting for all of your responses, and make sure that you're selecting the poll responses in the pop-up that comes up. While we're doing that, I just wanted to kind of give you a story about when I was actually in college and I was interning. I was interning for a company that had recently changed their name. So that was a huge issue for them in trying to recruit the best early career talent, because a lot of the people that they were targeting, they knew the company by a different name previously. And so they were kind of confused about when somebody reached out to them from this other name, they were a little bit confused about who they were, what they did, what type of company it was, until they finally got that context from somebody. But they actually had to talk to somebody to get that context. So getting over that barrier was really difficult for the recruiting team of that company. And I got to witness that evolution from who are you to, oh, okay, yeah, I know you now as this new name, even though you had a different name previously. So that's a huge employer brand issue that could come up. Oh, great, we have our results in. And it seems like the biggest challenge that people are facing in this specific audience is competing for awareness against big brands. Second to the lack of budget dedicated to employer brands. So that's a huge thing that we're going to be talking about today. So I'm really glad that you all are bringing that up, the competition for awareness against big brands or brands that have been on your core school campuses for a long time. That is a huge issue that our partners here at Handshake are facing every day, and Michelle will go into that a little bit later because she has firsthand knowledge with working with our partners. So great. Thank you all for your responses. I appreciate it. All right, moving into the what you're all here for, those employer brand mistakes, and we can kind of talk about how we're addressing those mistakes or how we're avoiding those mistakes and how we can fully implement our strategies moving forward. So the first mistake that people make, the biggest one that we're hearing today, is that people are marketing the employer brand pretty much the same way that the marketing team promotes the corporate brand. For example, if a company has a really big presence in a city and they're like, well, you know, we're the biggest name in the city, so we don't really have to communicate why people should want to work with us. People should just want to work with us because our product and our customers know us so well and love us so well, so that's why they should join. And that's really not a sustainable move. It might be a really great way to get people on board, but to retain them, you really need to provide them with the value of why they should stay with your company. So I'm going to hand it on over to Michelle to give you some tips around a long-term strategy and how you can build out a way to avoid this mistake.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, so for each of these mistakes, we do want to give you both a long-term goal to be working towards and then a short-term or useful tactic that you can implement today so that you have both options. So looking long-term, you'll really want to look internally and try to create an employer value proposition. That's something we call an EVP, and you may have heard about this in other places throughout the industry, but this is essentially you talking internally to all of your internal employees as well as your leadership team about what benefits you bring to every employer or every employee that works for you. So why is your organization different from any of your competitors or those big brands that you're competing against? What can you provide that's different than what they offer? And a lot of people get a little bit confused here because they start to think about, okay, well, my product is better, my solution is different, but that's not really what this is about. This is when your employee is coming to work every day. How is their interaction in your office different than if they worked for one of your competitors? And that's what you really need to start thinking about.
Definitely. I love that tip, Michelle. That's a great strategy that is definitely something long-term that everyone should be working on. What value you provide, and that can help you in competing with those big brands on campus. And so to give you a tactic that you can start on today to break it down into smaller steps, I wanted to let you know that you can start by just talking to Gen Z, 5 Gen Z hires, maybe 3 to 5, to ask them what they like working at your organization, what they like about working at your organization. What are the things that your organization brings to their career, especially in that early stage where they're trying to figure it out? What are the things that make them the most appreciated, make them feel like they have the most, they're providing the most value to your organization, which is very important to a Gen Z audience. You can also do some research for third-party studies around what Gen Z hires want. I know that Handshake has our career report, or college to career report rather, that focuses on what companies are looking for, what students are looking for rather in an organization that they want to work for. So that's definitely a great place to start. And so that you can figure out the main things that are important to Gen Z, the challenges and their aspirations for their early career stages. So that's where I would start, and getting some of those testimonials and sound bites will really help you formulate those employer value propositions. All right, we're going to jump into that second mistake. Now, you don't know how hiring managers and interviewers are talking about employer brand. So your hiring managers and interviewers are talking to talent every day that they are on a phone screen, or they are doing an on-site interview, or they're going to events and speaking with talent that you might want to hire as an intern or a full-time hire. And it could be problematic if they're talking about them in an inconsistent way. You might hear, an early career talent candidate might hear one thing from the hiring manager and another thing from the interviewer, and leave the interview being really confused. So we want to avoid that as much as possible. And Michelle is going to talk about a great way to implement a strategy to avoid that.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, and I actually have a personal anecdote here where I actually worked for a company where there was no really playbook for interviews. And so everybody just kind of would go into interviews and use their own questions, and there was no consistency across the team. And so that's really a great place for you all to first be focusing a lot of your effort, is to ensure that you have a training program or a playbook for everyone who is talking to any early career candidates. And really this should be for all candidates, but you all should always be on the same page. If you can work on creating a program that is essentially what your EVP is, the type of candidate you're looking for. We're going to go into that in a little bit later in our deck, but you really should all be on the same page so that you have a consistent message.
Definitely. And you also want to avoid if somebody is talking about that employer brand in a way that you don't think is true or that you can't support. If people are over-promising, that can be problematic down the line when you're trying to retain people, which is also a big deal. To talk about a tactic that you can start today, because I know building a playbook and a training program is definitely a long-term thing that will take a lot of collaboration and making sure everyone is on the same page. But something you can do today is scheduling an employer brand focus group. 5 hiring managers, figure out, okay, what are you saying when you are convincing somebody to join this organization? What are the things that you're saying we can provide to their career, and see if it's on brand with what your organization can do and wants to say about the employer brand. If not, then you can identify some of those problem areas and really focus in on those when you're creating those interview playbooks and training programs. So that's something you can start out with and gather some of that data so you can begin a platform for that long-term strategy. Does anybody else in the audience, I kind of want to get to know you all a little bit better. Anyone in the audience having this issue of you're not sure how your hiring managers and interviewers are talking about the brand, or you feel like they're talking about it in an inconsistent way? If anyone has any comments, feel free to throw them in the question box, and we'll take a look at them later just to get to know you all a little bit better. So feel free to participate whenever you feel like something resonates with you, a mistake is happening that you think you could work on, and you would like to use the particular tactic or strategies that we're talking about. So feel free to throw that in there. We'd love to hear from you. All right, moving on to number 3. you don't know all the ways that students are interacting with your employer brand. Now, this is a big one. For example, if you go online, search something that maybe a candidate would search and trying to research your company, and they're seeing something that you don't really want them to see, or you don't want them to think about your employer brand, that can be problematic. And you definitely want to get ahead of all of that and make sure that your organization is in control of how people are perceiving you. So Michelle's going to take it away on that one.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. So this is actually something that companies or organizations are talking about a lot more, and this is actually something that we call talent brand. So talent brand is the interaction that candidates are having with your brand, essentially when you're not in the room. So this can come up a lot in social media, this can be shown a lot in review sites, and a lot of times I think as employers it can feel like you just have no control over what's being said when you're not there. So you do want to, and Rachel will talk a little bit more about this, but the first step would be, of course, to get a read on what's going on in the marketplace and what people are saying. Once you're able to understand that and understand every channel where people are communicating about you, you will want to sit down and write up rules of engagement. And so this is basically your playbook for how you're going to interact with that talent brand on every different channel and every different site. And again, this is kind of going off our last tip. This is going to be about making sure everybody is on the same page and everybody is engaging with talent in the same way.
Definitely. I love that, Michelle. Thanks for sharing that. And to give you a tactic to start using today, do a simple search on a search engine, work at organization, or whatever organization you're working at. And for example, if I typed in work at Handshake, I would find a number of different ways that people are talking about Handshake. And so that will give you a really good idea of what people are first seeing when they're interacting with your brand and doing some research on your brand. So make sure that you know what's out there and take some notes. And do you identify any challenges? Are there any things that are misperceptions that are out there? Are there any unanswered employer reviews on employer review sites that you really want to make sure you're addressing to show that you care? There are so many ways that you can start doing this in a small scale way, and then that playbook will be huge for moving forward and helping your whole team to engage in this process. So I love playbooks. I use them in everyday life I work with the sales team here at Handshake, and creating playbooks to talk about Handshake in a consistent way is huge for me on the marketing side, and with recruiters on our side who are trying to, when I'm interviewing someone, I get a playbook from the recruiting team telling me, hey, these are the different ways that we want to show how it's like to work at Handshake. So it's a great way. I'm a huge fan of those. So I'd love to hear if anyone else has used playbooks or any sort of interview guides or guides for engaging with talent online, any brand perception. So throw that in the question box if you have any experience creating those playbooks. All right, moving on. Number 4, we are humming along here. So one big thing that I hear from a lot of organizations, and I know Michelle has too, they're worried that they're accidentally deterring students from underrepresented groups, students or alumni, any early talent. And that can be huge. It can be very unintentional, because sometimes the everyday language that we're using to talk about our employer brand might be problematic for certain groups, and we don't even know it. So there is a huge opportunity here to figure out a long-term strategy on how to avoid that lack of inclusivity.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. And it's funny, I think I've talked to nearly every single one of our partners about diversity and inclusion. So I know this is a big hot topic in the market right now, and I'm sure a lot of you are also focused on it. So the biggest thing you can do long-term is a lot of this accidental deterring can really come from the language you're using in all of your copy across all of your external facing materials. So that can be on your blog, in your job descriptions, on your career site, and even what's said during interviews. Some of that language is just accidental, and some people just don't even know that the way they're speaking could be potentially deterring certain groups. So if you want to click, Rachel, we actually have an inclusive language blog post. We've posted this on our blog. We're happy to share. These are the links, but of course we can circulate them after as well. And they're pretty long, to be honest, but there's about 70 inclusive principles that we've shared here. It's a 2-part blog series. We highly recommend you take a look at these and take this and try to implement it, especially as we build this long-term strategy.
Definitely. And there's some really great nuggets in there that people may not have ever thought of. And I know that when I was reading it, I was surprised by some of the things that I see every day on career sites, and I didn't realize that they could be deterring some people from applying. There's so many different language principles that can be used across your career site that might be problematic, and you want to make sure that you're getting ahead of that and that your language is inclusive of every type of talent group, especially the underrepresented talent groups that you are trying to hire to meet your diversity and inclusion initiative.
Yeah, actually, to add one example in here, one really small one that I've seen a lot is people writing like knock it out of the park. They're looking for somebody who's a really like strong player, but if you think about it in a deeper sense, that's actually like a sports reference. And so that in times can deter people who are not interested in sports or who don't understand sports, or maybe international students who don't know what baseball is, which is the real thing. And so it can be so small, little things like that, just to avoid that language will really help turn this around.
I love that point. Actually, I've definitely seen this in a number of different positions that are out there, that they are using colloquialisms or terms that might be regionally specific or might be something that they've heard every day, and they just never thought that other people that they're trying to hire wouldn't have figured out that term, and they might even subconsciously think like, oh, well, if that's like what the culture's like, I'm not going to fit in there. Even if they're not thinking it completely, in their conscious mind, it might be something that will accidentally move them away from applying to that job, and that's not going to help you hit your goals. So language is so important, and I work with language every day on the marketing team, and we have to be very careful to speak to our partners in a very clear and concise way that everybody can understand. And so I know that this is huge. And one thing that you can start working on today, because I know 70 principles is huge, and we could have a whole other webinar series on this topic. So put in the question box if you would like to see a webinar about this topic, because I think it's really interesting. Let us know. But something that you can do day to day is take out any mention of culture fit in job descriptions or interview prep guides. I personally am deterred by the word culture fit because I feel that it is very problematic when you're trying to hire somebody and they might not think that they are the quote unquote culture fit. They might not even know what that means. And they might think, well, if I'm not fitting in with this culture, and if your culture is already pretty standard across like one type of person or one talent profile, then they're not gonna, and you want to hire more diverse people, they're not gonna want to try to fit into this culture that may not be something that they feel like they're a part of. They want to feel like you're going to be welcoming of them depending on, their different style, their diversity of thought, their diversity of background, any type of a difference that they might have should be a value add to your company. That's what people want to hear. They want to hear that their difference in opinion and their difference in how they think is going to be something that you care about and that you want to hire, rather than something that, oh, you don't fit into this culture fit box, then we're not going to hire you. So I would highly encourage everyone to remove that from any of their interview prep guides that they're sending to interviewers, or any time you're talking to hiring managers, or any job descriptions that you might have, because that could be really something that people are not, that makes people not feel included. So I'd love to hear about your experience with this, and if anyone has had any experience using the term culture fit in their interview process and how that's worked out for you. And if you think that it helps, then let us know. We'd love to hear differing opinions too. All right. Number 5. You don't know what your company does better than your talent competitors. Okay, back to that number 1 issue that everybody is facing at this webinar, or not everybody, but 45% of the respondents are feeling at this webinar, is that your company doesn't know what you're doing better than talent competitors, because there is this huge brand presence on campus that you're trying to compete for talent with, and that makes it really difficult. And if you're not conveying that competitive value that you're adding over your talent competitors, then it's going to make it even more difficult for you to compete with for offers and for applicants on campus and for early talent alumni. So I'd love Michelle to jump into the strategy you can do to work on that.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. And hopefully you all are starting to see that all of this kind of ties together. All of these mistakes can tie together, and essentially once you're able to solve them, this essentially will be one big happy employer brand, hopefully. So for long term, you can see that Rachel and I love guides and playbooks, and so we're suggesting another one here. And this one, these will all essentially tie together, but this is for you to really look internally at your organization and understand who your talent competitors are. And I coach our partners on this almost every day. It comes up all the time where I have to coach them to try to think about talent competitors, and kind of like the point Rachel made earlier on in our conversation, but talent competitors are not the same as your general competitors. So you may be competing with a certain organization on a product level. So maybe you go after the same general target in terms of people you're trying to sell to, but usually in those situations, you may compete for completely different talent. So you may be looking at different roles, etc. And so there may be an entire different list of competitors you weren't even aware of that you compete with on a talent basis. So the first step here, and really the key to creating this long-term strategy, is to understand who your talent competitors are. Once you're able to understand that, you'll want to, again, work across your entire internal team. We always recommend a playbook or a guide, and work with everybody on coaching them through who those talent competitors are and what makes you different.
That is a really good point around your consumer competitors may or may not be the same as your talent competitors. They could overlap, especially if you're trying to recruit from people within the industry. But oftentimes there are so many great candidates that aren't in your particular industry, and you might be competing with a completely different type of company, which is always challenging and surprising, but kind of fun to dig into what people like to work, what people like about working at that organization. So another guide that we're suggesting here, and I see a few questions about playbooks, and people are really interested in that topic in the question box here. So I would love to dig into creating those internal guides and playbooks. And really this can be one playbook for all of these different internal trainings that you're trying to create. So it's all in one place. And I would love to dig into that in a future webinar or future content that we provide. So stay tuned for that. But I love all these questions about the playbooks. It's really fun because we both are very passionate about those internal guides because they can be so helpful. So we'll definitely be digging into that a little bit later. So stay tuned for more on playbooks. So a tactic that you can use today is just pick one top competitor that you're maybe losing talent to, you're losing out on offers, you're getting offer acceptances, their offers are getting accepted more than you are, and so you're feeling that pressure, you're feeling that stress around, okay, how do I defeat this talent competitor, the one that's top of mind. Take a few minutes or maybe take a half an hour, research 3 strengths and 3 weaknesses from that talent competitor. For example, my first place to start would be the employer review sites. For example, if you're seeing a lot of trends where people are saying pros of the company, I like that they provide these benefits, I like that they provide a career path that's very clear, et cetera, and if that's a trend in all those reviews that are on the site, then maybe that can be one of the top strengths that they have. Same for the weaknesses. People are saying it's way too stressful of an environment, people don't care about you, blah, 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 stuff like that, then that might be another weakness that you can not necessarily prey on. We don't want to, make any other organization, we don't want to be that organization that's putting other organizations down, essentially. And that's not something that looks good on you from an early talent perspective, but it's something that you can keep in the back of your head and play up your strengths in those areas. You know that early talent has been reading those review sites, and you can be like, for example, if they have a really tough work-life balance at the competing offer company, you can play up and really talk about how amazing the work-life balance is at your company, something that you can just highlight in a subtle way. You're talking about your strengths over your competitors, but you're not putting the competitor down. We don't want to do that, and you all know that, and you all are really great about talking about your strengths. So keep playing it up and make sure that you know which weaknesses that you can kind of subtly highlight from your talent competitors. So if that resonates with anyone, please throw it in the chat box and let us know what tactics you've been using to come up against competitors and anything that's been working for you to get more offer acceptances. All right, time for another poll. I'm really excited to hear from you all about the main way you are currently measuring your employer brand presence among early career talent. So go ahead, send in your responses. We love to hear from you. And while you're selecting your top way that you're measuring your employer brand presence, which is a tough topic, I want to talk about how in marketing, how we measure our consumer brand presence and how we understand how to measure how we're doing in the market and what people are perceiving of us, and how that can relate to employer branding. So for example, we look at PR pickups anytime that mentioned in PR news articles or any sort of media articles, any channels, social media channels, the different ways that people are talking about a company on social media. That's a big driver for how do we measure our corporate brand. Other ways that we're measuring it, how people perceive us in the market, through surveys, understanding what is the share of consideration that that the company or the product has in the market. So those are some of the ways that corporate marketing measures the brand awareness. And so let's hear about how you measure brand awareness. It looks like 29% don't know how to measure or don't have a way to measure employer brand, which I'm glad you're all here because we're going to talk about that in just a bit. And it looks like 31% have number of applications. Number of applications is that's definitely a big way that you can measure your employer brand. And I think there's so many other ways that you can measure it as well. For example, retention rates. That isn't reflected here, but that's something that is more of a long-term employer brand strategy. So we're going to try to dig into figuring out what's the best way that you can measure your employer brand at your company. And the short answer is it's not easy and it's not going to be the same for everyone. And Michelle knows that better than anyone here. So let's talk about that a little bit. So number 6, the mistake is you don't know the best way to measure your employer brand. So, and it's tough. And, almost 30% of us on this webinar said that they don't know or don't have a way. And so we're going to dig into some ways that we can figure out how to best measure and then implement those measurement strategies.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is another hot topic that comes up almost in every conversation I have. So thank you all for sharing, and we're here to help you better understand this. So the thing you need to think about and look internally in your current organization, you all need to be discussing what are the most important metrics for you. And this is going to be different for everyone. So there's no right way to measure employer brand. It's all about what you think and what your business actually cares about. So for example, some of the partners we work with will really focus in on how they're comparing with their talent competitors. So again, this will tie back to understanding who your talent competitors actually are. They'll look at their page views across different social media sites to see how much brand awareness they've built. And of course, employer reviews is a big piece as well. That's where you get some real context on what people are actually saying about you. And that's a great way to just measure not just the employer brand that you've created, but what that talent brand looks like and how you've built that. So understanding the metrics has to be the first thing you do. We urge you to talk to your leadership team, to talk to your peers internally and see what does the team care the most about and what is it that you as a business want to measure.
Definitely. And Michelle has so much experience around this, trying to help people to understand, help our partners at Handshake to understand what their employer brand measurement metrics are and what that looks like. And so she knows really well how to talk about this from a very strategic standpoint. And something that it might be very overwhelming because a lot of us don't know how to measure, but something that we can start out with just as a really good starting point is to get a survey going. Actually, I think 65% of companies measure the strength of their employer brand via internal employee surveys, which is a stat from HR.com. But that's really only giving you a perspective of the people that are already part of your organization. So the whole point of building brand awareness is to attract people to your company. So you'll want to get the perspective of the people that have interacted with your organization at an event, gone through your interview process, or even learned about you online. A great way to get that other perspective is through this survey. And we're actually providing you with a link to some survey questions that you can use. It can be for both internal and external, or people you're interviewing. It can be for anyone, really, to collect understanding of what type of perceptions people have about your company. And so make sure that you are sending out something along those lines, and you can also, of course, customize it based on your company and what you'd like to know about the employer brand. So hopefully, let us know if you use that. You can always send us a note if you use it, if it's helpful, if there's been any good learnings that you're getting out of this. So we'd love to hear if this template is helpful in any way. All right. Getting close to the end here. We're at number 7. Time goes by way too fast. So one of the big issues around employer branding is that people often perceive it as just one type of message to all types of students or all types of early career talent. And that's just not the case anymore. We're in an age of tailoring your message. You know, every Instagram ad is tailored to the specific user that it's showing up on their feed for, and there's so many different ways that brands are tailoring to specific types of talent, to specific talent personas. So Michelle's going to go into another playbook or internal guide that we're going to promote again. So Michelle, go for it.
Thanks, Rachel. And we hope everyone knows we're not coaching you to create 8 different guides internally. These should all be part of one big employer brand playbook. We really just want to coach you on the different pieces that you need to be focused on as you build this out. So a big piece, and this kind of actually goes hand in hand with diversity and inclusion. I don't know if you agree, Rachel, but a big piece is to be able to tailor your message to different audiences. So just like we're trying to make each of you create an open environment and an inclusive environment for people of all backgrounds, we also want to make sure you're able to interact with different talent personas. And I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with that term, but personas is essentially different audiences in the talent world. So maybe you have a different persona for your sales hires and your engineering hires, and all of those people look very different. And then, of course, you can break it down within those orgs as well for the different types of hires you want within, like, for example, the sales org. So long term, the goal would be for you to have this as part of your playbook and understand those different personas for every single piece of your business. And so understanding the type of background of the student that you're trying to recruit. A big piece of this, we would recommend pulling in your hiring managers pretty heavily for this strategy, because they are the ones that are actually hiring these people at the end of the day. And so they will be the ones that will really drive this persona and this part of the playbook for you.
Definitely. And actually, Michelle, I'm reading a really, really great comment from John, who sent us a note about using the term playbook. So maybe it's time for us to reconsider. This is awesome. An amazing comment. So John says that playbook is usually referring to a sports team strategies and plays, specifically in football. That is so true, and this is something that we've been using. Yeah, we've been using this internally for years, right? At all the different companies that I've been in, I didn't even think about that as I love it, and I didn't even think about it as something that might be deterring people from actually using it. So while this is an internal guide, it might be something that isn't as inclusive as we wanted it to be. So, John, moving forward, we are going to call it, what should we call it?
I think I like the term, and John, correct us if you have a different thought here, but I think the term internal guide is really useful, and maybe we'll break up that internal guide with different sections.
Definitely. And we'll think of a catchier name that we can use moving forward, because this has just really given me a lot of perspective, and I appreciate it so much, John. So thank you for that.
Wow.
All right. So for our internal guide, something that you can start with is emailing 3 early talent new hires in 3 different role types to ask for testimonials. So getting some data points around why people like to work at your company that are in those priority talent groups that you're trying to hire for. And so just getting a start with 3 is really helpful, and you can use those testimonials across all different types of channels. especially your employer pages on different channels online, anything from social media to your career page. These testimonials are really useful in everything, and then they can also be used in emails or campaigns to specific groups. And it's been it's really helpful for when a recruiter is sending out an email to somebody that they're trying to hire, and they have a testimonial from somebody in that particular major or in that particular department that they want to get a job at. And it makes a huge difference that you're tailoring your messages out to specific people. So make sure that you're focusing in on that. All right, number 8, we're at the end. I'm really sad, but also I'm happy that I'm able to talk about this with you all. So number 8, if you don't have brand strategy in place for recruiting in new locations, that can be really problematic. And maybe you're not opening any new locations, but you might soon. You might be going into a new region. So it's always way better to be prepared for moving into a new type of environment or region, because that's going to come with a bunch of different struggles and challenges, but also a lot of fun, and you can learn a lot. So Michelle's going to talk about how you can build out that strategy for when you are moving into new locations.
Yeah, absolutely. And so a big thing that I talk with all of my partners about, especially from the Handshake perspective, is of course expanding your school list. And so I think what I've learned in this role especially is what a lot of teams do is they have a very specific list of schools that they hire from. Maybe that's from like colleges that people in their org have gone to, or whatever it may be, but it's usually a very small list. And so it can be pretty difficult when we start to work on expanding that reach and expanding to new locations, because a lot of times that's something that is brand new to a team and they just are not sure really even how to do it. So we definitely recommend, one, it's really worth looking at expanding that school list. That's why we work here is we're trying to help students from all different backgrounds and all different schools basically connect with employers like yourselves. And so you'd sometimes be really surprised where some of the best talent can come from. And so that's a big thing that I work with all of my partners on, but also working with your internal teams on what that success looks like. And this kind of ties back to some of the other recommendations we've made already today, but understanding the metrics that you're measuring on when you go to a new location or a new school. What is really going to determine success from that strategy? And so looking internally, working with your executive team and your peers on what success looks like, and then measuring that in every new location you go to.
Definitely. And that's huge. I mean, sometimes companies and organizations are focusing on very specific schools just because it's a legacy thing. They've always been recruiting at those schools, and there's so many talented people out there that might not have had the opportunity to go to that specific school. It might have been for financial reasons. It might have been that they weren't necessarily, didn't have the right specifications for that school, but there's so many talented people at schools that you might not even have heard of. And so it's great to figure out what are the best schools for you to recruit at and what have the highest ROI. And some way that you can get started, because I know this is a very daunting task to start recruiting at a whole new location, but something fun that I like to do at organizations just to try to help my organization recruit is post on social media with a popular event hashtag in a new location that you're trying to recruit at. For example, if you are trying to recruit here in San Francisco, maybe you're going to talk about outside lands, and if you can kind of play on the fact that there are a lot of Gen Z people that are going to Outside Lands, which is a music festival very popular in California here. And, are you stressing at Outside Lands because you're still looking for your post-grad job? So people who are scrolling that feed are going to be looking at this, and you're going to get a lot of eyes on your job. And so you can you can add your job link and say that you're hiring for a specific type of job in this area. And so get some eyes on that. Actually, I worked at a company that was very big on this. So I worked at a social recruiting company for a few years, and the whole company would get involved in recruiting by setting up automated social posts to and adding hashtags like this one that are in specific locations, or hashtagging for specific types of hires that we wanted to make. And so we would all pitch in and get eyes on those jobs. And even if you're not necessarily getting a ton of applications from a single tweet, you might be getting a lot of brand recognition and brand awareness from these tweets that you're sending out. So I'd highly recommend this. And if you've tried this or if you'd like to try it, let me know. And we can talk about different tactics that you're using to hire on social media, because we all know that Gen Z is big on Twitter, big on Instagram. So I want to hear your tactics on this, because I know you all have some great tips for us too. All right. We're going to recap those 8 tactics in case you missed it, or in case you wanted to just hear it again. Here are those 8 tactics that you can start today to help build your employer brand strategies. I know this is a huge, daunting task to totally revamp or evolve or even build an employer brand. So we wanted to provide you with these 8 tips to get started today in relation to those 8 mistakes that we want to avoid. So these are what we talked about today. And if you had any other tips that you think that we missed, or anything that you use in your day-to-day life that you would like other people to know, feel free to throw it in the question box, in the comment box, and we'd love to hear from you. We always like to hear what other people are doing. And so make sure, if you want to tweet about it, that's always fun, since we were just talking about Twitter. Make sure you tag us at Join Handshake. Oh, sorry, the box covered the name there, but it's at Join Handshake. And if you tag us and tweet about your biggest tactic that you use to help build your employer brand, or something that in this list that you're planning on using and that you're excited about, we'd love to hear about it. We love for people to get involved, and it's always a fun way to add to your professional Twitter feed and talk about ways that you are recruiting different Gen Z talent. So please interact with us on social media, because it's always fun, and I love to read those comments. I know Michelle does too, and we like to talk about it here at Handshake, so feel free to join in the conversation. All right. I also wanted to talk about Handshake Premium. So you're all using Handshake now, and I wanted to let you know that we have a premium offering that will help you to really focus in on those long-term strategies. And you need to focus in on those strategies. You need to consider the technology that you're using to attract that early career talent. So it's great that you're starting out using Handshake and posting jobs and taking a look at different student profiles and alumni profiles. But I also wanted to let you know that Handshake Premium is our platform to help you engage early talent at every step of the career journey. So with this solution, you can drive priority students. So those priority groups that we talked about that you want to hire for, you can drive them to your events and your jobs, and making sure that you're having real conversations with people that are actually great candidates for your job. You can also connect more meaningfully at these events by driving those target priority groups and making sure that you can check them in seamlessly and smoothly. You can also highlight your story, highlight that employer brand story across all channels on Handshake. So students are highly engaged on Handshake, and so making sure that your brand is everywhere, from branded jobs to your employer page to how you're responding to different reviews, that's going to be key in building out that employer brand strategy and getting in front of this Gen Z talent. And finally, I want to let you know that Handshake Premium gives you the opportunity to build relationships at scale and with context on all of your historical conversations in the candidate journey. So you're able to see a really rich and diverse set of talent that's out there, and seeing their backgrounds and in a really holistic way, and understanding the different touch points that you've had with those candidates. And so if you'd like to learn more, you can email employers@joinhandshake.com. So we can give you a little bit more context around what Handshake Premium does and how it can help you build an employer brand strategy, because it's going to be huge that you have the right technology to move forward and make sure you get everything in place so that you can measure your employer brand and measure your brand awareness over time, which Michelle has helped tons of our partners do every day. So she can help you there. And we'd love to just talk to you about your employer brand strategy and hear about what other people are doing in the market. So reach out to us either way. All right, time for our favorite part. We have a few minutes for a live Q&A, so we're not going to get to all your questions, but we will have somebody reach out to you after to provide you more context around your question if we don't get to it today, because we have so many, and there's so many great, really engaged people on this webinar, and I'm really honored to be here with you all, and I know Michelle is too, if I can speak for you, Michelle. I'm so excited to be talking about our favorite topic, employer branding. So let's start with what are some ideas for brand strategy if you don't have budget? And that's a big one, and that's a really tough one. It's not a mistake. It's really just something that you don't have the resources for. And I think Michelle can take it away with kind of that high-level strategy of what you can do over time, and I'll jump in with some quick tips as well.
Yeah. This is a really great question, and I'm sure that people across the board are struggling with this a little bit. And the great thing about building an employer brand and building that employer value proposition is you don't essentially have to pay money to talk about this internally. And so that's what we always recommend starting with. A big piece of this and just understanding what your brand is talking about this together internally and everyone being on the same page about what that EVP looks like, who you are, how you want to market yourselves. So step one in this is just to essentially be on the same page internally. Additionally, especially with talent brand, where people are talking about you essentially with you not in the room, that's happening organically across a number of different channels. So the second thing here would be, one, understand what this brand strategy looks like internally, and then two, be keeping an eye on all of those channels and tracking what is being said about you in the marketplace. Most of the review sites will allow you to respond, and you don't have to pay money to do that. And so make sure you're just interacting with that brand and with that talent everywhere that they're talking about you, and then responding back to them is probably the best place you can start, especially with budget kind of out of the equation. What do you think, Rachel?
I love that answer, and I think that there are so many ways, especially with that internal guide that we were talking about, getting everybody on board, getting everyone to be talking about your employer brand in the way that you believe is the most impactful for your student audience and for your young alumni audience as well. So making sure that you're doing all the things that are free, social media, those review sites that we were talking about, different ways that you can communicate via brand campaigns. Those are all things that you probably already have in your toolbox, and so making sure that you're using those to the fullest extent. Also, there was a question about those negative reviews and how you deal with them, and so I think that goes along really well with what we were just talking about and what Michelle said about just making sure that you're responding and making sure that you have a consistent way that you're responding gracefully, authentically, and with making sure that you're not getting defensive. Now, I've worked at companies and organizations in the past where the responses got really, really defensive on negative reviews, and that's not something that people normally want to portray, that it makes the organization look like it's always on the defense, which I guess is another sports term, but in a way that we are, you don't want to always be reacting. You want to be proactive in your approach. And so making sure, even if it's an extremely negative review, you want to respond with grace, respond with humility, and explain that you are working as an organization to improve on those points. And then actually try to improve on those points and make it clear internally in the organization, because even internal people read those reviews as well because they're curious what other people are saying about the organization. Making sure that they know we are working on these points because we know that there's been a trend of these people mentioning these as an issue, and here's the steps that we're going to take to solve it. So making sure that you are being really clear on how you are taking steps to improve things internally, and that's going to expand to the external world when people are talking to their friends about your company, and your organization rather. And it looks like we are out of time. So I really appreciate everybody's thoughtful questions. We will reach out to you to get those answered, and make sure that everyone is happy with how this went. So we'll be reaching out personally, and I'm so happy that I got to talk with all of you in a very, very engaged audience, and really smart and intuitive too. Just all these comments I'm reading through that I didn't get to mention, but thank you so much.
Thank you all so much for your time today. We loved talking through this with you, and we're excited to continue this conversation with you all going forward. So sorry we couldn't get to all of these questions. They were so great, and so we will definitely follow up with this after a webinar today.
Yes, very excited to do that. And we will all talk soon. Thank you. Have a great day.